I want to thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jeff Garris. I'm the Outreach and Partnerships Director here at the Pennsylvania Policy Center, where I'm joined by a number of my colleagues in the room, Dwayne Heisler, Adrian Stanley. We also have Mark Steer, Laura Beltran, Kirsten Snow. I think we also have Susan Gobreski with us here, who is also part of the PA Policy Center team. We have a lot of folks helping out to make this really interesting and informative meeting. As you have probably already noticed, or if you've been in these meetings before, you are aware that we keep all of the lines muted for people who are attendees so that you don't have any disruptions while our speakers are sharing their thoughts and their reflections on the topic that we have at hand today. But we do want to have this as an interactive experience. We want people to be able to ask questions. So if you have a question or a comment, feel free to type it in the chat. It's probably there at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many of these questions as we can. Our goal is to conclude by 2 p.m. I will get to as many of these questions as possible and pose them to whichever of the panelists you've directed these questions to. And we look forward to a really great and interesting conversation. What is the conversation about? Well, if you got the reminder for this, you know that coming up in just about 2.5 weeks, on Tuesday, February 3rd, Governor Josh Shapiro will do what we've had governors do for many decades now, which is to deliver a budget address, outlining the plan and releasing the document of how the governor is proposing we allocate funds in Pennsylvania to serve the needs of the Commonwealth, and also how we raise that funding to do that. It's typically on the first Tuesday of February. We're expecting that, and that is, of course, February 3rd. Typically, that takes place right around noon. And I want to let you know that we will be doing a special follow-up to this meeting today, probably 3 p.m. that day. I'll give you more information about that later, but we're going to be coming back and talking a little bit more with the folks we have here today. What we're talking about today, though, is what are some of the things that they see as real needs, things that must be in the budget, things that they are hoping the governor will prioritize and allocate the funding for the services that impact so many Pennsylvanians. And we're going to be hearing from folks who are leaders in the field of advocacy today. I'm going to introduce them in a moment, but we have something very special today, something a bit unusual. We have a very special announcement. And so for that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend, my colleague, and our executive director, Mark Steer. Mark.
Thanks, Jeff. This is a very exciting day for our organization and for me personally. As I imagine most of you know, I announced in September that I would be leaving my position as Executive Director of Pennsylvania Policy Center and Pennsylvanians Together in Action as soon as we found a replacement. We've been looking hard, and I'm happy to say we've not just found a replacement, but we've found someone who I think will build on the work that the staff and I have done over the last 10 years and really take PPC to a new level. She's Felicity Williams, whose most recent position was as Deputy Chief of Staff to Pittsburgh Mayor Ed Gainey. As I've gotten to know her in the last couple of weeks, I've been incredibly impressed by her passion for economic, gender, and racial justice, and her deep knowledge of so many parts of the policymaking process. I think she has the perfect qualifications for this job, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what she does in it, and I'm really looking forward to going on to the next portion of my life. So Felicity is here with us today, so I want to turn it over to her and give her a chance to introduce herself.
Thank you, Mark, and congratulations on this next chapter in your life. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. For those I have not met yet, my name is Felicity Williams, and I'm honored to join you as the next Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Policy Center and Pennsylvanians Together in Action. I wanted to take just a brief moment to say hello and put a live person to the announcement that just went out, and expressed how excited I am to begin working alongside all of you. My background is rooted in public service, coalition building, and advancing racial and economic justice. As Mark said, most recently I served as Deputy Chief of Staff for the city of Pittsburgh, where I worked at the intersection of policy, government operations, and community voice. Across that work, I've seen firsthand how research, advocacy, policy, and organizing can come together to shape budgets, priorities, and real outcomes for working families. That is what drew me to this role and to this organization. As you all know, I don't have to tell you, Pennsylvania Policy Center and Pennsylvanians Together in Action play a critical role in translating data and policy into action, lifting up what is possible, and ensuring that policy decisions reflect the needs and dignity of people across the Commonwealth. I'm especially mindful that we are stepping into a pivotal moment. The year 2026 will be consequential for Pennsylvania and for this country. Decisions made in the next budget cycle and beyond will shape access to education, childcare, transportation, healthcare, and economic opportunity for years to come, as you will hear more about shortly. The stakes are high, and the work ahead is urgent. I'm excited to get to know each of you, to learn from your expertise, and to build strong relationships grounded in trust and shared purpose. There is a lot of work to do, and I'm ready to get to work alongside you. Thank you again for being here today and for everything you do to fight for a more just and inclusive Pennsylvania. I'm grateful to be on this journey with you, and I look forward to seeing you around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felicity. Welcome. It's so great to have you here. I think we'll have many opportunities for folks to get to know you better in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you also to Mark Steer for being at the helm here during my entire time. I've been here for a little over 12 years. Mark's been here more than 10, I believe. And so it's going to be a big change, but we're really excited about the energy, the enthusiasm, and the experience and perspective that Felicity brings to this. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Felicity. Looking forward to continuing to work with both of you in different ways in the months, years ahead. So thank you. We're not going to be taking any questions for Felicity today. We are going to now sort of shift into our focus of this meeting, which is talking about the state budget. As I mentioned, the governor's budget proposal is going to be coming out on Tuesday, February 3rd. He will deliver the budget address to a joint session of the General Assembly. The General Assembly then, over the next few weeks and months, will hold some hearings in their Appropriations Committee, asking questions about the budget, probably putting out some counter arguments against what the governor's proposed or in support of what the governor's proposed. But the goal is, and it's part of the state constitution, which is that we are supposed to have a balanced budget enacted by the General Assembly and the governor by the start of the fiscal year, which is midnight, July 1st. If you were paying attention last year, you know that they didn't get even close to that. They didn't even finish it during the summer. It dragged on well into the fall with a lot of very negative consequences for agencies that are serving the public good and that deserve to be paid for the work that they do. We're not sure what the next budget season holds for us. There were things that we found disappointing in last year's budget. There were things that we felt were really great, important investments. But we're bringing together some of our friends, some of our allies, some of the folks who are leaders in advocating for policies that will make Pennsylvania a better place to live for all of us. We're really pleased to have them here with us today. I'm going to introduce them all now, and this will be the order that they will be speaking. Again, if you have questions for any of them, please type them in the chat. Any comments there, we'll get to as many of those as we can. To start off, we are very excited to have with us here from Transit for All Pennsylvania, the state campaign director, Connor Deschmaker, who's going to be telling us a little bit about some of the things they would like to see for public transit and transportation. Following Connor, we will hear from Kimberly Early, who is the Senior Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Penn AEYC, which is the Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children. Dwayne Heisler, our campaign director, is going to be speaking, but he will be speaking following Sandra Miller, who is the advocacy coordinator for Education Voters of Pennsylvania, talking about the investments that are needed for basic education funding. And then, as I said, Dwayne came alphabetically before Sandra, but we will be hearing from Dwayne kind of explaining a little bit about how we believe we can fairly and equitably and fully fund all of these services. So again, we're really excited to have all these folks here. If you have questions, type them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. On that note, Connor, take it away.
Thank you all so much for letting me be a part of this. Thank you specifically to Jeff and Dwayne for always being game for doing all this work. So as mentioned, Connor Deschmaker, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the statewide campaign manager for Transit for All PA. Our work is to advance fully funded, reliable, accessible public transportation in all 67 counties in Pennsylvania. To that end, we know that transit was the sort of top line issue, at least in the media narrative throughout last year. But a lot of times that narrative really just talked about SEPTA, and then to a lesser extent, PRT, which so the Philadelphia and the Pittsburgh region transit systems. While it is true that those systems were and are in tremendous crisis, our work is to really show that this is something that should be the bipartisan consensus. That is our, goal with Transit for All PA, is recognize that this is a human issue, and that there's data to back up that there are just as many non-drivers as a percentage of population. In the more rural communities in Pennsylvania, as but one example, the service area of ATA, Area Transportation Authority, in north central Pennsylvania, they have some of the highest incidents of disability in the Commonwealth, and highest incidence of elders, folks that are especially dependent on public transportation. So to that end, what is coming most acutely for us is that within the next 2 weeks, Lanta, the transit agency that serves the Lehigh Valley, so Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, they are cutting service by 5%. And then within the months that follow, they are also raising fares. And what's interesting about this is that Lanta is the only transit agency in Pennsylvania that has restored service to pre-COVID levels and grown ridership to pre-COVID levels. So they did everything right. They did all of the things that the quote unquote fiscal hawks say they want out of public transportation. And yet they still can't pay their bills. And I've been told by the leaders of that transit agency that this won't be the only year that they cut service. They expect to cut service next year as well. Sometimes they might use rhetoric like right sizing, but we cannot live in that world when that's our fastest growing region in Pennsylvania. So again, I use that as the hook to say that this is a crisis that's coming for everyone. We were told there's a 2-year runway for public transportation. That's not true. Maybe for SEPTA and maybe for Pittsburgh Regional Transit, but before that deadline, at minimum, we will see service cuts and fare increases for Pocono Pony in the Monroe County, Red Rose Transit in Lancaster County, BARDA in Berks County, Lanta in the Lehigh Valley, and most likely in Westmoreland County as well, the exurbs of the Pittsburgh region. So to that end, we are demanding that Governor Shapiro be putting transit again at the forefront of his messaging. And I see a note in the comments that, yes, systems like in Erie County and in Harrisburg, Dauphin County, they've never restored Sunday service after COVID. So when people say we want to preserve the status quo, and I want to be clear, I hear this on both sides of the aisle, the status quo is austerity. We have already lost service, and we know that is not the paradigm that we need, that we can live in, that we can afford to live in if we want a prosperous future for Pennsylvania. So to that end, while we are also pushing for the governor to make this at the front, we have a policy that is in the House and Senate. We have the Transit for All PA funding proposal. I'm going to put some of these links in the chat after I'm done talking. But this is something that was proposed last year, and is a framework by which Pennsylvania can restore service for every transit agency to pre-COVID levels. And for systems that are outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, they can actually increase service 10% above. And all it would take is raising very wonky taxes and very bipartisan taxes. The car lease fee and car rental fee, those are things that haven't been touched in 35 years and are among the lowest in the country right now, and are primarily used for things like business travel and or by folks that are disproportionately affluent when it comes to the car lease tax. And then we have a rideshare fee. You want to know who has a statewide rideshare fee for Uber and Lyft? Kentucky. So these are not wild, left proposals, these are things that are common sense, and that coupled with a sales tax allocation transfer that the governor has proposed the last several years, we can invest in service growth at a moment when Pennsylvania needs it desperately because everyone is facing, again, austerity, diminishing returns. The two things I'm going to share quickly about that are related to the governor's budget that I will, and then I will pass it off. So here is our action. This is our hub for everything that we do as Transit for All PA. And on this page, you can find a letter campaign that was just relaunched last night. You can find information about what's at stake for all of the agencies across Pennsylvania. You can sign up for our budget watch party, which I'll bump in a second. You can sign up to be a regional organizing fellow in Lancaster and the Lehigh Valley. And we've got weekly organizing opportunities in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and then a variety of local and statewide campaigns. To hit that watch party, I'm really excited. I know the folks at Penn Policy will be talking about their sort of post-op event soon. But I'm really proud that we are expanding what we did last year. We had a watch party that was just focused on transit. This year, we're going to be moving it into be focusing broadly on investment in Pennsylvania, and we want your organization to partner in it. So I'll put some information in the chat. And we would welcome and are happy to share contacts if you partner with us on this. We want to add more logos to this. We want this to be the progressive watch party that we can then transition directly into Penn Policy, Pennsylvanians Together's post-op that should be happening later that afternoon. I'll stop now. I'll put some info in the chat. Thank you again for giving me the space.
Thank you so much, Connor. Really appreciate all of the great information and the inspiration for folks to stand together on these important priorities. Just so that folks know, Connor is very busy, has another place to be at 1:30, so they will be departing at 1:30. And Connor, we do have one of your colleagues from the coalition to answer any questions that are submitted in the chat for you. Which colleague is that again?
So it'll be Laura Chu-Weens. She'll be hopping on any minute. I'm going to text her right now to make sure she's joining.
Great. So we'll be ready to send any questions that you might have for Connor along to Laura when Laura joins us. Again, thanks so much, Connor. And now we will move on to talk about early childhood, early education, childcare issues with Kimberly Early from Penn AEYC.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks to the Pennsylvania Policy Center for the invitation. The Pennsylvania Association for the Education of Young Children, PNACE, is the state affiliate of the national AEYC, and we're part of a network of 51 affiliates and nearly 50,000 individual members nationwide. PNACE represents a membership of over 2,100 early childhood care and education professionals throughout Pennsylvania, and we have 10 chapters throughout the Commonwealth. So as a statewide nonprofit membership organization, our membership includes center-based teachers and directors, home-based providers, higher education faculty, and students. So our mission is to be an effective voice for high-quality early childhood care and education, and we do that through policy development, advocacy, professional development, and supports for early childhood professionals. And our vision is that each and every Pennsylvania family will have access to high quality, affordable early childhood care and education opportunities for their children, provided by a profession that is valued, well compensated, and supported. And I'll drop a link in the chat when I'm done to our website so you can take a look. But Pennsylvania is a principal partner and lead in the Early Learning Pennsylvania Coalition. It's a statewide coalition of advocates that are focused on supporting young Pennsylvanians from birth to age 5. And the Early Learning Pennsylvania Coalition currently operates 4 distinct issue advocacy campaigns. I'm going to be talking about 2 of those today. Pre-K for PA, which launched in 2014 with the vision that every 3- and 4-year-old in Pennsylvania will have access to high-quality pre-K, and then Start Strong PA campaign, which launched in 2019 to support healthy development, working families in the economy by increasing access to and affordability of high-quality childcare programs for young children. So the Start Strong PA campaign and Pre-K PA Pre-K for PA have a vision for Pennsylvania families and the economy. And it evolves around fixing the early care and education system in Pennsylvania. We know that high quality, affordable childcare and pre-kindergarten programs are critical for the economic success of Pennsylvania's working families and the readiness of our next generation. Unfortunately, the early care and education system in our Commonwealth is strained, holding back parents, children, and the overall economy. So the problems are that parents cannot find or afford care, and providers can't afford to operate. So Pennsylvania must advance policies that do two things simultaneously. One of those is help families afford and find early care and education, and then ensure that early education programs have the resources they need to provide it. So in order to do that, we want to help families find and afford childcare and pre-K needs, and we need to do that through expanding eligibility. So that means raising income limits for childcare subsidy and pre-K counts, which is our state-funded pre-K program, to approximately $129,000 for a family of four, for example. And then also that this shows then supports for low and middle income working families that are struggling to afford affordability on many fronts, right? And then we also need to increase awareness. So that means investing in public outreach so that families understand the programs and the financial supports available to them. In order to provide a robust or build a robust early learning sector and improve system quality, Pennsylvania needs to pay the true cost. So that means raising state childcare subsidy reimbursement rates to match the private market rate to help providers meet rising costs. So funding a study that establishes a new permanent fair rate setting system based on the actual cost to provide high quality care and education. It also means increasing pre-K counts and Head Start Supplemental Assistance Program reimbursement rates to ensure those programs can meet costs and provide appropriate compensation for teachers. And then we also need to support our educators. We need to grow the Child Care Recruitment and Retention Grant Program that was just established in this year's budget to raise wages and recruit and retain staff. And then we also need to support the credentialing and professional development there as well. And then we also need to make sure we're including all children. So investing in supports that enable programs to successfully support children with special needs and behavioral health care challenges. And then in order to create a smarter, more stable system, Pennsylvania needs to have a one-stop access for families. So that means positioning the early learning resource centers, which are single hubs across the state in the 19 regions, so that they are a single hub for families to use and navigate childcare and pre-K options. And then we also need to make sure we are preventing crisis during budget stalls. So we heard Jeff talk about that. The ensuring pre-K counts and Head Start programs continue to receive payments during budget impasses. And then we also need to expand options. So allowing high quality licensed family childcare homes to be a part and provide pre-K counts, and that would basically expand choices for families so that families have different options that meet their needs. And I'll turn it back over to Jeff, and I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Lots of really helpful and important information for folks. Again, if you have a question for Kimberly or any of our panelists, all of the lines are muted, so please drop it there in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We're going to move on our agenda here. We're going to hear now from Sandra Miller with Education Voters of Pennsylvania. Sandra.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I have some slides, but I just wanted to give a little brief update. Education Voters of Pennsylvania, if you're not familiar, our executive director is Susan Specka, and she is out in the field today doing a thank you event with legislators, and I am stepping in to cover for her. But I know that you often are used to seeing her face, and I just wanted you to know that she regrets that she can't be here, and I hope I can fill her shoes. But just a brief background, Education Voters of Education is a statewide policy and advocacy organization, and our mission is to ensure that elected officials adopt and implement a pro-education agenda, which of course leads us to the topic of today, which is the budget that drives so many of our decisions. We are very fortunate here in Pennsylvania that we were able to have an historic victory for our students in February of 2023 when the Commonwealth Court declared Pennsylvania's school funding system unconstitutional. When people say that when I say that we are fortunate, is that across the country there have been these decisions and we haven't had implementation of that decision. Next slide, please. But fortunately in Pennsylvania, we were able to utilize the Basic Education Funding Commission to come up with what is now established as our adequacy target. And every school district has that target. And then compared to the number that was determined that spending should occur, about 70% of our school districts across the state have a shortfall that we now call the adequacy gap. Please, next slide. So in order to address that, it's a stunning amount of money. When you combine all of those districts together, it's a $4.8 billion total gap. There were some steps that were made legislatively that put into the school code and the fiscal code something that is now called an adequacy supplement. This funding stream actually is included in the Ready to Learn block grants, which was an existing grant program that had been around for decades. That program allowed a mechanism for the disbursement of this money, and it does go into the school district's bases so that it slowly will help address that large gap that occurs statewide. Unfortunately, the $494 million, which is an astonishing amount of money, and we were very, very grateful for that, actually only filled 11% of that gap. Next slide, please. So this past year, we were, as all of us, we were wondering what was going to happen. Is there going to be the second installment? Is this something that we envision as a true commitment from the General Assembly to endorse the proposal that was repeated again by Governor Shapiro? And we were very fortunate that over $500 million was again put into the budget that was just recently passed as our second installment. The total gap, which was the $4.8 billion, was the entire share. In the past year, it was decided this year that the entire gap is going to come over as state share, and none of that component will be part of the local budgets any longer. So there was a slight increase that occurred for certain school districts that had lost some of their adequacy gap because of their local tax effort. And in addition to that, they decided that every school district should get some sort of a payment. So a $50,000 payment then was added to all districts that do not receive an adequacy gap, or if their gap was below $50,000. So it ended up resulting in over $500 million that's required now in order to meet that adequacy gap on the installment plan that is currently here. This graphic that you see shows the second year. We don't have an end year. In essence, if it follows this pattern, it will take 9 years, but we are advocating that they increase these installments, make sure that they are something that is a full commitment to make sure that this adequacy gap is eliminated. But we just don't have that commitment in the code and from the General Assembly. So we're waiting to make sure that this will happen in the coming year. Next slide. So our priorities for this year's budget is the third installment, approximately another $500 million. If you add what people call the tax equity program, those are the programs that basically tax their way to equity and tax their way into adequacy, are faced with if they're at 90% of that, they also receive a supplement. So we'll be hoping for at least 500, but if they add all of the supplements together, it could be a $600 million supplement that will be required in order to continue the movement towards closing our adequacy gap. We really believe this is a non-negotiable item, and the PA Schools Work Coalition that we are all part of has that as a priority, that in order to continue to meet the constitutional mandate that was dictated by the court decision, we all have to advocate for the completion of this process of closing the gap. But in that process, we have to remember that we also have to keep up with inflation because these numbers are set on data that was, previous year's data. So we really need to make sure that we continue to invest in our basic education and our special education funding to at least keep up with inflationary costs, or otherwise we actually find ourselves falling behind. We were also thrilled this past budget year that there was meaningful and important and essential changes that occurred to our cyber charter school process. Accountability is extremely important. We believe that it will have a major impact on things like attendance and truancy. We are thrilled that the wellness check situation has been addressed, and we really believe that also the residency requirements will have an impact fiscally. Small changes were made in how the calculation of the tuition level is going to be done, and we are monitoring that. And we believe that it's important that the Department of Education is very vigilant in making sure that they follow through with all of these new changes that have been put into code. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that education has been seen as a very strong priority from the governor and from the House, and we believe that the commitment from the state Senate has also reflected in their continued inclusion of adequacy, and we all need to support that in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Really important information here. Thanks so much for providing those slides too. It really helped to keep track of that data. We're going to have our final speaker today, Dwayne Heisler, will be talking a bit about how we raise the revenue and how we can raise the revenue fairly. Dwayne is our campaign director here at the Pennsylvania Policy Center. Dwayne, take it away.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everyone. Over the past few budgets, we've seen Governor Shapiro, Democratic leaders in the General Assembly, and with some Republican support, actually, make some real progress. We've seen increased funding K through 12 education, which we just heard about, more investment in higher education, and also expanded tax credits for low and moderate income Pennsylvanians. And all of that matters. And I think it also shows what's possible when we choose people over politics. But it's not enough. We still haven't fully fixed our broken education funding system, which we just heard. Public transit, which we just heard too, is underfunded. Childcare, healthcare, post-secondary ed, they're still out of reach for so many Pennsylvania families, and too many Pennsylvanians are just scraping by when they should be able to thrive in this state. And the core of this problem is how we're actually paying for the budget. Right now, Pennsylvania is spending about $4.5 billion more each year than it brings in. And that gap has been masked by this $13 billion surplus, which was one-time COVID relief funds that we got. And that surplus is about to be gone in probably about 2 years. But let me back up a little bit. This isn't a new problem, because even before COVID, their lawmakers were kind of like papering over the budget shortfalls with gimmicks or one-time money or borrowing from our future. And it's not because Pennsylvania spends too much. On a per capita basis, we're right around in the middle, right at the national average. So where the problem is our tax system. And so, first of all, Pennsylvania has one of the most upside down tax systems in the whole country. The bottom 99% of Pennsylvanians pay nearly twice the effective tax rate that the wealthiest 1% do. And you just can't, you just simply can't fund schools, healthcare, transit, when the ultra wealthy are not paying their fair share. So, and then secondly, over the last 20 years, Pennsylvania has cut corporate taxes by roughly $7 billion a year. So today, more than 70% of corporations, including the multinational giants, pay nothing in state corporate income tax. That's not an accident. It's the result of a system that really rewards wealth and does not reward work. And so the consequences are really clear. The richest Pennsylvanians keep getting richer while wages for everyone else barely move. And so what are we advocating for? I think what I'm really trying to say, it's time to be honest and bold about this, that Pennsylvania really needs to ask the wealthiest, ultra wealthy individuals and multinational corporations to finally pay their fair share. Policies like a fair share tax, a severance tax, a worldwide combined reporting, they would all raise the revenue that we need while actually allowing us to cut taxes for working Pennsylvanians. And I think that that's how we build a budget that really lets people do more than survive, that it's how we make life more affordable. And we've been hearing a lot about that word. And it's how we actually invest in a Pennsylvania that helps all of us. So that's what I'm hoping to see in this budget. I'll turn it back to Jeff.
Thanks so much, Dwayne. So we have a question here in the chat that we've received. We do have plenty of time for questions. So if folks have other questions that they'd like to pose to any of our speakers, please drop them in the chat now and we'll get to as many as we can. First question we have is from Ralph. The question Ralph has is, what roles do the intermediate units play in the various efforts to provide funding and services to the younger students, let's say pre-K through second grade? So this sounds like a question probably for both Kimberly and for Sandra. Either of you are welcome to respond first.
Sure, I can start out on the infant toddler side. So thanks for the question, Ralph, and I did send you a note in the chat. So in many cases, the intermediate units do provide early intervention services across the state. It just depends on the county and the area. But early intervention for infants and toddlers, which is birth to 3, is provided by Department of Human Services, and then early intervention services for children 3 to 5 is provided by provided through the Department of Education. So just to kind of clarify that, and Sandra, I'm sure we'll talk about the 3 to 5. So for and Panacea is a part of the Thriving PA campaign, which is under the Early Learning Pennsylvania Coalition umbrella, which focuses on child and maternal health and also early intervention and lead screening and abatement. So the IUs do play a role there, and early intervention services are managed at the county level. So each county decides who's eligible and who's not, and there are some differences in some cases, although those are some of the things that there's a work group around early intervention that's kind of looking at and working on. And there is a need to increase the rates for early intervention providers as well. So I hope that gives you a little sense of what the connection is between early intervention and childcare. And I'll pass it to Sandra.
Yes, thank you. So the intermediate unit, educationally, once it goes into the kindergarten through the second grade is what you're doing. But in general, is the supportive services to school districts. They provide many of the services that are needed that a school district itself might not be able to provide to special educations or in general students that have the individualized education plan. Those funding usually is a fee for service. So a school district will pay an IU to provide services to the students that were within their catchment area of a school district. Also, in another kind of wonderful relationship, IU services are sometimes provided directly into buildings in school districts. So it allows school districts to cluster their own students within a building and provide special education services. So there's a really nice relationship between the two. They also receive funding from other sources directly as a pass-through through the Department of Education, from the federal government, other grants that they receive directly from the state. And then the rest of their services are basically like a fee for service type of a relationship that they have with school districts. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks so much, Kimberly, and thank you, Sandra. Really appreciate you helping to explain a little bit more, and thank you to Ralph for that question. We do have plenty of space and time here for questions in the chat. I see that Kimberly has just dropped in the Thriving for PA Early Intervention Part C, the link there, so folks have that. A question from Laura. Question is, any thoughts about the impact of artificial intelligence, including in schools and data centers, on Pennsylvanians?
No, there is.
This is not, I think this is not one that's necessarily clear for any one specific person, although it does seem to talk about education a bit too.
I'll start a little bit on the schools, and then we can let other individuals come in on the data center side of things. Schools are looking at a variety of policies that are being put in place and guidance that's coming from the Department of Education regarding AI. Many schools have started to develop their own internal policies on how to deal with it. I would say that it is still a growing area that schools need extremely specific and strong guidance to make sure that we manage it in a way that is utilized as a tool and not being something that that can be used to penalize. I mean, students are using it. So they have to find a way to make it a positive experience and find a way to make it be utilized for actual student learning and student growth. And it's going to be a complicated situation. And as an old school director, I've been following this with some of my colleagues. And I think that it's going to result in an opportunity for teachers to grow and to be able to utilize technology in a way that they have not been able in the past. You have to remember, we are still growing how well we use technology. Many school districts were not as technology advanced until COVID hit, and they've really had to embrace many of the one-to-one situations, the utilization of even things like whether cell phones are allowed in classrooms. We're still having that debate. So AI is just one more item on the technology battle that we'll have to address in schools.
Thanks, Sandra. I don't know if anybody wanted to add anything else to that. I will tell folks that what we're hearing from everybody in Harrisburg is that you are going to hear over and over again, probably in the governor's speech and probably throughout the next few months, the legislators and folks who are working on these issues talking about what they're calling data centers and how data centers are going to impact local communities and what some of these entities that want to build these data centers should be doing to support those communities. So I think that's going to be a big issue. I think you're hearing about it from folks on both sides of the aisle. We'll see what actually happens with that. Jillian, I see you have your hand raised. Adrian, could we unmute Jillian? Jillian's been a part of a lot of the work that we've been doing in transit. So Jillian, maybe we can go to you for comment.
Hey, yeah, no, on data centers, I really just wanted to, say, number one, I think please definitely check out Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. I'm from Better Pennsylvania. We're also going to be working on data centers, but please check out Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. And, I think that it is incredibly, incredibly important for, all of our areas to really watch the data centers that you should be concerned about all the data centers, because although we need them, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to be here on Zoom, you really have to look at what's called AI hyperscalers. Those are the data centers that are being used to create those, AI graphics and sounds that take up huge amounts of energy. Last year data centers used more water than the bottled water industry, which is a lot. And, we're also seeing things in Western Pennsylvania. The building of a data center was approved that will have over 100 gas generators, or excuse me, not just gas, diesel generators on its roof. Just really destroying the air in a place where, frankly, we need to be doing better, more work. So that's going to be really a gigantic issue coming up. There's a bill that is out there already, and I think that it's so important for us to keep on top of that.
Thanks so much, Jillian. Thanks for chiming in on that. That was one we didn't necessarily have planned how we were going to handle questions on that, but really important information. And as folks can see in the chat, Susan Gobreski from our team dropped in information there from Penn Future with some of the information there about model ordinances for local communities. We're going to take a couple questions here now on transit. We had Connor needed to depart, but they made sure that we had someone else from the Transit for All PA Coalition joining us. We're really pleased to have the executive director of that coalition, Laura Chu Weens, here with us. Laura, thanks so much. We've got a couple of questions here related to transit. I'm going to put two of them together. One question comes in from Catherine asking, is Transit for All PA advocating for public transit in every county in Pennsylvania? And PJ has a question, what is Pennsylvania's plan for getting more funding for transit in rural areas not directly related to transit systems, mostly programs like the shared ride, medical assistance, and other programs for seniors? Laura, feel free to answer any of those questions.
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. Thanks for having me. So I will say that Transit for All PA, we're actually hyper focused on regions outside of the major metropolitan areas, and really building a presence and a base that's demanding more funding and more service in those regions, not only because we know that it exists already and it's just maybe not as organized and not as visible, but also because we know that in order to win transit everywhere or anywhere, we have to show that the need and the demand exists in particular outside of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And so that's why I think Connor mentioned the organizing fellowships that we're doing in Lancaster and Lehigh Valley, and then ultimately in Westmoreland and Scranton, Wilkes-Barre region this year, Lackawanna County. But I think a big part of the calculus is really that these are regions in which there are important political leaders that need to hear that transit matters to their constituents in order to get them to support new and dedicated funding to the Public Transit Trust Fund, which provides resources for all the transit agencies, both shared ride and fixed route transit, although we know that the shared ride services sort of cobble together resources from a lot of different sources. We are also very explicitly lifting up the stories of rural users of paratransit services, and because transit matters everywhere, it's just not always in fixed route form, and have been really highlighting the PennDOT shared ride report that shows that there's a massive deficit in that specifically, even more that one that is causing more of a crisis even than on the fixed route services that operate in the larger regions. So it is absolutely our intention and our strategy to deeply engage with transit riders in places outside of the major metropolitan areas and lift up those needs.
Thank you so much, Laura. And thanks for the great questions folks are submitting here. I want to note, Will commented here in the chat that another area that needs to be addressed in the budget is rates for services provided to Pennsylvanians with disabilities and aging Pennsylvanians. Providers are finding it impossible to hire and retrain direct care workers. For personal assistance services, Pennsylvania pays approximately 24% less than the rate paid by the lowest rate given by the contiguous states to Pennsylvania, our neighbors. Every state surrounding Pennsylvania has higher reimbursement rates. Really important to note. And I will also note, in terms of talking about people with disabilities, Jeff from the Pennsylvania State Independent Living Council notes that it's important to remember when we talk about transportation issues for people with disabilities in addition to seniors. And I know that's a major priority for Transit for All PA. So really important things to remember here and keep in mind. I'm going to note, we've got another question here. This is an education related question. The question is from Diane. What are the thoughts about impacts on the reduction in staff of the U.S. Department of Education and for special education? Sandra?
Thank you for the question. I was just actually on another call right before this regarding exactly that topic. So the interagency agreements that are currently being proposed that will move major segments of the Education Department into the Department of Labor will have a major impact. I guess this morning they did announce that for at least the higher ed component, that the staff themselves now will be moving to the Labor Department. So they are moving ahead with this, even though that there are 2 lawsuits, trying to address that and keep that from happening. Over 1,000 people signed a letter that asked them not to dissolve the Department of Education. Ultimately, the current biggest impact that many school districts are feeling, it's probably not at a district level, but it is a family level. The Office of Civil Rights pretty much, went to, half the size that they were on their local offices, and many complaints that that students were using for discrimination and a variety of different levels of harassment and were either dropped or have been no longer will being pursued. And then in response to that, they hired a number of the staff back into OCR at the national level. And we had hoped that that would be a more positive move. And we found out today that they actually are going ahead and they filed 18 cases against states, and Pennsylvania is one of our school districts, on discrimination regarding affirming policies that are in place for transgender to follow the Supreme Court discussion from yesterday. So, the staffing and the cuts are going to have a major impact. We are following the budget on the federal level. We do believe that the current resolutions is a slightly lower amount, but it is very similar, not nearly the really detrimental cuts that the Trump administration has originally proposed. So we do believe that the House and the Senate are trying to at least hold the line on the cuts. But the biggest concern is where it's the brain drain. Where are the staff going to go that support so much of the work and maintain things like the Title IX, the Title III, which is utilized for our students that need to learn English, the Title II and Title IV activities that are used for staff development and for innovative learning. So it's a major concern for us in the education world, and we are following it closely. But we'll see what happens in this next budget cycle and especially how the implementation of the interagency agreements occur.
Yeah, a lot of ways that these federal policies and changes really impact us here at the state level, and then asking what are our legislators at the state level doing to help protect us against some of these terrible policy changes. I'm going to note we have here from Rachel, who works with the Imagine Different Coalition. That's a coalition that focuses on ensuring that children with disabilities have the supports they need to grow up in families and not institutions. Rachel notes here that children have not been able to get the home health and other in-home supports that have been deemed medically necessary for them. We are interested in ensuring that the budget for Medicaid MCOs is based on need and not on past payments that understate the need. Really important information there. Thanks so much for raising that, Rachel. We still have time for a few more questions. I am taking a look here. Laura wants to remind folks again, and we'll be doing this at the end of the meeting, to join Transit for All PA for a governor's budget watch party on Zoom. And in person if you are in Philadelphia. That's on February 3rd, again, the day of the governor's budget address. Information is in there, and as well as the link to the Mobilize for that. Laura, do you want to mention anything else about that? Okay. Great. Also, noting here that Dwayne, one of our other panelists and part of the PA Policy Center team, dropped into the chat some information about an event coming up tonight. This is the Livable PA Toolkit launch. There's information there in the chat, as well as a link to that. Dwayne, do you want to do a quick promotion of that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. This is really exciting for all you change makers out there, advocates. You know that toolkits are really helpful in getting the word out. And we put so much time into those toolkits and we use them, and they're mostly a once use and done. And so we've looked at that differently. And I want to do a big shout out to, we heard from earlier, Jillian with Better PA. We have designed a Livable PA toolkit, which has tabs on all of these advocacy topics that we've been discussing here today in our budget with ongoing, it's a livable document. It's an ongoing updated toolkit that can help you to find the words that you need to communicate on social media, to send out your email messages, to talk with other folks and to share. And so tonight at 7 p.m., we are going to have the launch of that toolkit. So I would encourage you all to join. The information is there in the chat. And I also want to give a shout out earlier. We have a campaign that's being launched by Pennsylvanians Together called For Our Commonwealth, talking about how we need to raise revenue. That will be in Harrisburg on the 27th from 9 to 3 with a press conference at noon in the East Wing Rotunda. Very exciting. The link for that is there as well. We welcome all of you to join. And if any of your organizations would like to partner with us on that, reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat. Thanks, Jeff.
Great. Thanks so much, Dwayne. Yeah, lots of great things happening, a lot of work to be done, and a lot of great folks working together. Sandra also noted here in the chat that if anyone is interested in monitoring the OCR issues in Pennsylvania, follow the work of follow our work with Pennsylvanians for Welcoming and Inclusive Schools. That's the great acronym PA WINS, and Sandra has the link there in the chat. Anything you want to add to that, Sandra?
No, that's fine. It's a wonderful coalition that EdVoters supports, and we are just thrilled that that so many people around the state care about our children and making sure that we have affirming policies in our school districts. And unfortunately, Great Valley is being pursued because of that.
Great. Well, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to go to Kimberly. Kimberly, I want to see if you have any final thoughts, anything you'd like to encourage folks to keep in mind as we head into this budget season.
Yeah, I did put in the chat earlier the links to the two campaigns, the Pre-K for PA campaign and the Start Strong for PA campaign. I encourage you all to join those campaigns. You can sign up as an individual or an organization. We send out periodic emails. It's not a lot. We don't spam you, but we do let you know if there's opportunities to reach out to your state or even federal legislator regarding issues that are happening. We do action alerts. And then we also have petitions that you can sign if you support increased investments in early care and education. So we'll likely have one of those sometime after the governor's budget address. We typically do that, so there'll be an opportunity. We have thousands of folks sign on, but the more the better, to make sure that everyone understands the importance of childcare and pre-K and how they're the workforce behind the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Dwayne, Sandra, Kimberly. Thank you to Mark and also Felicity, who are part of our program here today. I am dropping in the chat some information here. So today we were talking about looking ahead to the governor's budget address and the governor's budget proposal, about some of the things that advocates would really like to see included in that. We are going to come back on the day of the governor's budget address. Now, I dropped there in the chat the link again for Transit for All PA's watch party. Tune in for that. Also, in addition to being in person in Philadelphia, they're doing it in person in Pittsburgh too. I'll have to let my adult kids who live out there know about that. And then after the governor's budget address concludes, hopefully after you've been part of that watch party, we will be coming back. Tentatively, we're planning for 3 p.m. on Tuesday, February 3rd. We are going to be bringing back folks representing the different organizations and the different advocacy efforts on these topics that we talked about today. Early childhood, childcare issues, education, transit, raising revenue fairly. We're going to be coming back just shortly after the governor's budget address. Again, I think that's scheduled for 11:30 to start. It's usually a lot of walking in the room, shaking hands with people and doing selfies and stuff like that, but it typically starts right around noon. There was a really long one a year or two ago. We're not anticipating that, but we are planning to get together at 3 p.m. online. I dropped the information in the chat there, the link to register. If for some reason there's a change in the plan, or if anything changes about when we would be doing that after the governor's budget address, we will reach out to everyone who is registered, let you know, confirming the time for that. So I would encourage you to register right now, get it on your calendar, and join us in just 2.5 weeks. With many of the same faces and many of the same topics here to see how does the governor do in addressing and advancing these topics. Looking at the time, we are at the end of our hour. Thank you so much to all of our guests. Thank you to my colleagues at the Pennsylvania Policy Center who did all the work here to make this meeting run so smoothly. Thank you to all of you for caring about the issues and conditions in Pennsylvania and doing the work that you can do in your community to fight for the kind of Pennsylvania that we all deserve. Thanks so much, everybody. 2026 is going to be a big year. Let's all stick together. Have a great one.